An oblate in Christian monasticism is a person who is specifically dedicated to God's service. Currently, oblate has two meanings. Oblates are individuals, either laypersons or clergy, normally living in general society, who, while not professed monks the nuns, have individually affiliated themselves with a monastic community of their choice. They make a formal, private promise to follow the rule of the order in the private life as closely as their individual circumstances and prior commitments permit. Such oblates do not constitute a separate religious order as such, but are considered an extended part of the monastic community, and as such, Benedictine oblates also often have the letters OBLSB or OBSB after the names on documents. They are comparable to the tertiaries associated with the various orders of friar. Oblate is also used in the official name of some religious institutes as an indication of the sense of dedication. Origins and history. The word oblate has had various particular uses at different periods in the history of the Christian Church. The children vowed and given by the parents to the monastic life, in houses under the rule of Saint Benedict, were commonly known by this term during the century and a half after its writing, when the custom was in vogue, and the councils of the Church treated them as monks. This practice continued until the 10th Council of Toledo in 656 forbade their acceptance before the age of 10 and granted them free permission to leave the monastery, if they wished, when they reached the age of puberty. The term pure oblate labels an oblate who had not yet reached puberty and thus had a future opportunity to leave the monastery, though pure oblates can also refer to someone entering an abbey. At a later date, the term oblate designated such laymen or women as were pensioned off by royal and other patrons upon monasteries or benefices, where they lived as in an almshouse or homes. In the 11th century, Abbot William of Hirsau, in the old diocese of Spires, introduced two kinds of lay brethren into the monastery: the fratres barbati or conversi, who took vows but were not claustral or enclosed monks; the oblati, workmen or servants who voluntarily subjected themselves, whilst in the service of the monastery, to religious obedience and observance. Afterwards, the different status of the lay brother in the several orders of monks, and the ever-varying regulations concerning him introduced by the many reforms, destroyed the distinction between the converses and the oblatus. The Cassones Benedictines, for instance, at first carefully differentiated between conversi, commessi and oblati. The nature of the vows and the forms of the habits were in each case specifically distinct. The converses, the lay brother properly so called, made solemn vows like the choir monks, and wore the scapula. The commessis made simple vows, and was dressed like a monk, but without the scapula. The oblatus made a vow of obedience to the abbot, gave himself and his goods to the monastery, and wore a sober secular dress. But in 1625, we find the converses reduced below the status of the commessis, inasmuch as he could make only simple vows for a year at a time. He was in fact indistinguishable, except by his dress, for the oblatus of a former century. Then, in the later Middle Ages, oblatus, confrater, and donatus became interchangeable titles given to anyone who, for his generosity or special service to the monastery, received the privilege of lay membership, with a share in the prayers and good works of the brethren. Canonically, only two distinctions ever had any consequence: that between those who entered religion, promotum professionis, and promotum simplicis conversionis, the former being monarchy and the later oblati; that between the oblate who was mortuus mundo, and the oblate who retained some control over his person and his possessions, the former only was accounted a persona ecclesiastica, with enjoyment of ecclesiastical privileges and immunity. Oblates today, Secular oblates. In modern practice, many Benedictine communities have a greater or smaller number of secular oblates. These are either clergy or laypeople affiliated in prayer with an individual monastery of their choice, who have made a formal private promise to follow the rule of St. Benedict in the private life at home and at work as closely as their individual circumstances and prior commitments permit. As the oblate is in an individual relationship with the monastic community and does not form a distinct unit with the Catholic Church, there are no regulations in the modern canon law of the Church regarding them. One consequence is that non-Catholic Christians can be received as oblates of a Catholic monastery. Similarly, in Methodist monasteries, non-Methodist Christians can be received as oblates. The same is the case with many Anglican monasteries, which accept non-Anglican Christians as oblates. Conventual oblates. To be distinguished slightly from other secular oblates, there is a small number of conventual or claustral oblates, who reside in a monastic community. If the person has not done so previously, after a year's probation they make a simple commitment of their lives to the monastery, which is received by the superior in the presence of the whole community. More on the level of committed volunteers, they would share in the life of the community and undertake without remuneration any work or service required of them. They are not, however, considered monks or nuns themselves. Often they wear a religious habit similar to, but distinct from, that of the monks or nuns. A conventual oblate may cancel this commitment at any time, and it is cancelled automatically if the superior sends the oblate away for good reason, after simple consultation with the chapter. Religious congregations that use oblate in the name. There are several religious orders that use the word oblate in the name or in an extended version of the common name. These are not oblates like the oblates and should not be confused with them. Examples include the Oblates of St. Francis de Sales, Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate, Oblates of the Virgin Mary, Oblates of St. Francis of Rome, Oblates Sisters of Providence, Oblates of St. Joseph, Oblate Missionaries of Mary Immaculate, a feminine secular institute. Notable oblates: St. Henry II, Holy Roman Emperor, St. Francis of Rome, the Servant of God Dorothy Day, Kathleen Norris, Walker Percy, Gottschalk Vorbais, Cardinal Francis Eugene George O. M.I. St. Bishop Eugene de Mazenot O. M.I. Cardinal Jean-Marie Rodrigue Villeneuve O. M.I.